An undersea collision sends more oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The Interior Secretary says he will impose a new moratorium on offshore drilling after a federal judge strikes down the ban. And a showdown in Eastern Europe as Russia cuts natural gas supplies to its neighbors.
From the Energy News Center in Washington, D.C., this is the Energy Report with Susan McGinnis.
Good afternoon, I'm Susan McGinnis. Thanks for joining us for the Energy Report. An accident underwater is sending more oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The Coast Guard says BP has been forced to remove the cap containing oil gushing into the ocean. Admiral Thad Allen says an underwater robot bumped into the venting system. That sent gas rising through a vent that carries warm water down to prevent crystals from forming in the cap. Allen says the cap has been removed and crews are checking to see if crystals have formed before putting it back on. Interior Secretary Ken Salazar says he will issue a new order imposing a moratorium on exploratory drilling that eliminates any doubt it is needed and appropriate. This after the White House promised an appeal of a judge's lifting of the ban on new deepwater drilling in the Gulf. The judge said the government just assumed that because one rig exploded, the others pose an imminent danger too. The new director of the government agency overseeing offshore drilling is creating an investigative arm to help him improve the agency's performance. Michael Bromwich, the new head of the Interior Department's Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, says the investigative team will look into allegations of misconduct and respond to emerging problems. In testimony before a Senate subcommittee, Bromwich says the new unit will report directly to him and will help ensure oil and gas companies comply with laws and regulations, as well as investigate problems within the agency itself. Well, BP's Gulf of Mexico headache now belongs to Bob Dudley. Embattled, CEO Tony Hayward today turned over BP's handling of the spill to Dudley. He is now the point man in efforts to stop the gusher and deal with the economic damage that it caused.
My own personal priority is to listen to the people along the Gulf Coast, the claim centers, the officials, to make sure that we can move the resources and get them there as fast as we can to make sure we respond to the economic losses that people are incurring, as well as making sure BP puts all of its resources to the equipment and the people out there that are working on the spill response itself.
The White House has postponed until next week a meeting set for today between the president and key senators on energy legislation. The meeting with senators of both parties was supposed to be an attempt to find a way forward for energy and climate legislation that appears stuck in the Senate. Since the Gulf spill, Obama has called for urgent action on an energy bill. China's ordered oil companies to beef up safety precautions on its offshore drilling platforms in the wake of the Gulf disaster. The State Council's Safety Commission warns that China's main offshore oil company, China National Offshore Oil, faces increasing risks from aging equipment and weak rescue capabilities. New regulations would safeguard offshore and gas pipelines. They'll be submitted for a vote Friday at the National People's Congress. CNOOC says it's upgrading blowout preventer systems and deepwater diving equipment to enable workers to eventually work at depths up to 6,560 feet. World oil demand will grow on average nearly 1.5% a year through 2015. This is a new IEA forecast updated because of better prospects for economic growth. Last year, growth was forecast at 0.6% for the 2008 to 2014 period. Demand is expected to reach 92 million barrels a day by 2015, assuming annual economic growth of 4.5%. IEA expects a strong rise in oil demand from China, India, and the Middle East. Weaker, though, are also actually flat elsewhere, especially in Europe, where the economy is fragile. The EU is warning Russia and Belarus not to allow its growing gas war to affect Europe, just as Lithuania becomes the first country to complain its supplies from Russia have taken a 30% hit. That supply flows through Belarus. Russia has been closing off gas deliveries to Belarus over what it claims is a nearly $200 million debt. Belarus says it paid its entire gas debt to Russia and warns it'll stop the transit of Russian gas across its territory to other European countries unless Moscow settles its own debts to Belarus by tomorrow. Poland has won EU approval to give $478 million to an energy company to expand the country's gas storage 60%. EU governments need regulators' permission to give large state handouts to companies. Poland wants to give the money to its state-owned oil and gas company to increase storage to 1.6 billion cubic meters. Russia shocked European customers by cutting off gas supplies in that dispute with Ukraine last year, forcing EU nations to increase storage and in the longer term look for more alternative energy sources. Massey Energy is suing to strip the federal government of its ability to influence how coal mines are ventilated. Massey says MSHA imposed a plan that made it harder to ventilate the Upper Big Branch mine before an explosion killed 29 men at the southern West Virginia operation on April the 5th. Mines rely on ventilation to remove methane gas and coal dust. Massey says the lawsuit is not directly related to the explosion, and MSHA spokeswoman declined to comment. And a new item on California's November election ballot, an initiative that would suspend California's global warming law until unemployment drops. The California Jobs Initiative would delay that global warming law until the jobless rate falls from 12.4% now to 5.5% or lower and remains there for a year. This 2006 law, supported by Governor Schwarzenegger, set a goal to cut greenhouse gas emissions in the state and impose new requirements on utilities, manufacturers, and other businesses. Oil companies funded the drive to put that initiative on the ballot. Supporters say it would cost jobs and lead to higher energy prices. Let's take a look at some energy goings on around the Beltway tomorrow. At 8:30, the Alliance to Save Energy has a breakfast at the caucus room to share perspectives on energy policy and the status of federal plans to create a clean energy economy. At 10, the House Natural Resources Committee has a hearing in Longworth featuring state, local, and non-governmental officials on their oil spill response plans. And at 2:30, the Senate Commerce Committee has a hearing in Russell on ensuring the safety of our nation's pipelines. That's the Energy Report. We'll see you tomorrow with your latest energy headlines. For any suggestions or comments about our programming here on Clean Skies News, we'd like to hear from you. You can email us at contact@cleanskies.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. From all of us here in the Energy News Center, have a good day.